Government of Grenada lays down 3 options on the way forward for the MNIB. We'll have details to this story and more in the National Report.
Have you noticed an increase or decrease in your electricity bill? You know that changes in the fuel and non-fuel rates affect your bill. You should also be aware that changes in household activities affect your bill. Ask yourself these questions. Have the rates changed? Have there been more people at your home? Have your children been on holiday? Have you used your fan or air conditioning unit more often to beat the heat? Are any of your electrical appliances or equipment faulty? Have you added any new appliances such as transformers, water heaters, or pumps? Make it a habit to understand any changes on your electricity bill. For more factors that affect your bill, visit www.grenlec.com. Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
With the details to the news for Wednesday, January 11th, I am Rikisha St. Louis. The government of Grenada is considering a few options as it moves forward towards addressing the grave financial sinkhole that the Marketing and the National Importing Board has found itself. When the new administration of Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell assumed office in June 2022, it was confronted with the reality of the dire state of the MNIB, which currently owes about 12 million EC dollars in debt to both farmers and other suppliers, as well as other financial and non-financial institutions. To keep the company afloat, government had to pay the salaries of workers for November and December 2022 and anticipates having to pay their January salaries as well. Prime Minister Mitchell says the situation at the MNIB has deteriorated so badly that creditors have begun knocking on the doors of government, demanding outstanding payments.
The Marketing and National Importing Board owes 2 banks significant sums of money, totaling roughly about $6 million. As it stands, the MNIB is unable to pay the banks, and the banks have indicated to the government that obviously, in polite language, they'd like to know how they are getting their money. Item 3, give or take, MNIB owes about $2.8 million to other creditors. I suspect some of those other creditors, some of you may be in the room. That involves farmers, suppliers, landlords from which it is operating, utility suppliers like the power company, etc. And obviously it is challenged to pay these persons as well. The amount owed roughly is about $2.8 million to these persons. And so we are challenged because obviously the government has to make a decision in the current circumstances whether and how and to what extent it can continue supporting the Marketing National Importing Board.
In light of this, after meetings with the staff and union representative of the MNIB, government laid down a few options on the way forward for the organization and is taking these ideas to the people for discussion. 3 options were laid on the table. 1, a complete shutdown of MNIB and the creation of a new entity. 2, a partial closing of some aspects of MNIB and government assuming some of the debt. And 3, government continues to pump money into the MNIB in hope that the board can find effective managers to turn things around.
The other option is to completely close Marketing Board down. And the government assumes all of the liabilities I've just mentioned, which is the government then has to take over the loan approximating to $6 million to the banks, find the money to pay the severance to the staff, which give or take, we are told is in the region of $2.5 or $3 million, subject to verification, and assume the 2.8 subject to verification $1 million that is owed to other persons. That doesn't factor in the fact that MNIB itself owes the government several millions of dollars from the government having, for example, taken over the payment of the Answer McCall loan, which was about $4 million that MNIB could not pay. The government took that over. There's a company owned by the government, Partygrenada Limited, which also lent MNIB substantial sums in the millions as well. That has not been paid or serviced. So ignoring those for the time being, if the decision was made to shut MNIB down, we would have to pay the severance to the employees between $2.5 and maybe $3 million. We'd also have to pay the other persons MNIB owe, including farmers, which is roughly another $2.8 to $3 million. That's about $6 million. We'd have to pay the banks, which is roughly about $6 million. So that's about $12 million. That's if we simply shut it down and didn't do anything else. So that's one option. The other option is to shut it down and to start afresh. And to start afresh, at least from the discussions held by the government, would involve forming a company that permits the government, the private sector, and other stakeholders to become shareholders and have a public-private partnership that allows for MNIB to come back as a new entity. The other option is to look at a restructuring or revamping of MNIB that involves potentially sending some of the staff home, closing down some of the outlets, particularly the retail outlets that sells food and juices and what have you, and attempting to get MNIB to concentrate on what perhaps people may say its core function, which is the purchasing of farmers' produce, hopefully the storage, sorting, preservation, and the finding of markets for the produce, including the export market. So that option is halfway between shutting down completely and doing nothing at all. That option also would involve the government having to pay some of the workers their severance. It would also involve the government having to assume and pay some of the debts owed to farmers and other personnel, including utilities, etc. It would perhaps also involve the government having to pay the banks some of the funds, because if the loans are not serviced and serviced in a timely manner, the banks do have the power to step in regardless of what the government says.
Some of the people in attendance gave their views on the MNIB issue and the way forward.
Right now, we cannot close down marketing board. If we close down marketing board, Grenada closed down. We need marketing board need the farmers. So we have to look for a solution to revive marketing board. One of the solutions is that they get foreign market for the farmers, that marketing board should not be competing with the farmers.
Well, I've been selling to marketing board since Mr. James' time, so that's a long time, since I was a little girl. And it bring me to my independence. I just tell people I'm an independent woman because I could do anything and get anything I need. So it will be very sad to lose marketing board right now, because some of my independence will be gone, because that is one of my main markets besides the market in the States. That's my main market where I supply all my stuffs like cocoa ball, all the spices.
The first consultation with the public was held on Tuesday at the St. Andrew Methodist School. Education Minister Senator the Honorable David Andrew makes an appeal to parents and guardians to use the appropriate channels to address conflicts. Minister Andrew, who is also a psychologist, described an incident which occurred on Tuesday and has sparked much debate on social media as regrettable. Sarana Mitchell reports.
I think that occurrence is pretty regrettable. It ought not to happen. I don't know the circumstances, so I can't speak to any detail, but it's just not in good taste that a parent, regardless to the circumstances, would choose as an adult to engage in physical demonstrations of that sort on a student.
Minister for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, Honorable Senator David Andrew. Minister Andrew says another approach could have been taken, such as engaging the school or the ministry.
Because there are channels. There's a principal. I'm sure even if it were a case where there was some altercation among students, there are counselors in most of the schools assigned. There's a department through the ministry, there's a chief education officer. There are so many layers through which any such issue that may occur can be treated with than to deal with it themselves. So, I mean, as Minister for Education, I think it very regrettable. I want to apologize to the persons who've been offended and suggest that we follow all of the channels.
The minister, who is also a psychologist, mentions that bullying in any form has detrimental effects.
I mean, bullying is not something that we need to tolerate. And persons abusing each other, be it an adult to a child or a child to a child, it's just not something that we as a Ministry of Education condones. It hurts, it damages emotionally, psychologically, and it leads to a lot of ripple effects down the road. But what could be more detrimental is our response to it. Because if you respond negatively, like I believe that response was, it still doesn't make the matter better. And it could further compound it. So it's something that I personally condemn, and I wish it doesn't have to happen again.
Senator Andrew reiterates the need to utilize the channels that exist if any disagreement ever occurs.
Should any conflict arise, I suggest to parents, to anybody, students even, talk to a teacher, talk to an educator, talk to somebody in the school system, talk to a responsible adult, but to take it into your own hands, I mean, that's just a breakdown of every other law and order there could be, and it's not something that we support.
For the National Report, I am Sarana Mitchell.
Thank you, Sarana. This is the National Report. The news will continue after the break.
My name is Travon Lead, and I'm a fisherman to buy a bigger boat and an engine, and that's going to benefit me and my family and to help others. It's a yes for sis.
Welcome back. Coordinator of the National Award Ceremony, Jacqueline Alexis, says nomination deadline is Thursday, January 19th. The National Celebrations Committee recently made a call for the submission of names of Grenadians who have either made a significant contribution to nation building or had a personal achievement so that they can be recognized during the 49th Independence celebrations this year. Alexis said the National Award ceremony will be incorporated into the rally at the National Stadium on February 7th.
Something that they believe is deserving of recognition on a national scale. And so we're asking the general public to submit those names to us at the ministry to email address. It's MINSEC, so it's MINSEC at sports.gov.gd. So that's MINSEC at sports.gov.gd. No later than the 19th of January, so that's next week, Thursday, 19th of January, by 4 p.m. at the latest.
The submission must include a citation, statement on the achievement, contact details for both the nominee and the nominator.
We're looking at 4 to 5 awards, and obviously, depending on what comes in, we will make a final decision. We're not necessarily saying it has to be from one specific parish or the other. Sometimes it might be that there is a parish that has 2, there might be a parish that has none. So it's just, we will select the best of the best, basically.
Finally, in the news, Grenada is now the 15th country to accede to the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions aimed at protecting the environment from hazardous chemicals and waste. Officials conducted a one-day workshop on Wednesday with relevant ministries and departments to give a better understanding about Grenada's role, responsibilities, and expectations from the convention. Basel Convention Regional Center for the Caribbean is a coordinating center established under the Basel Convention. Grenada first expressed interest in joining the convention in 2022. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Climate Resilience, Environment and Renewable Energy, and Grenada's focal point of the Basel Convention is Marina Jessamy. She highlighted the significance of the convention and how Grenada stands to benefit.
The conventions that we are managing, we cannot implement them alone. And that is why we have with us, I will try not to be exhaustive, but just to pull out the persons that are here. We are happy with the Port Authority, with Grenada Solid Waste Management Authority. We have Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have Ministry of Carriacou and Petit Martinique Affairs. And I can go on and on, Ministry of Health. because we realize that we cannot implement alone. So when it comes to the SDGs, number 3, good health and well-being. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Number 13, climate action. Number 14, life below water. Number 15, life on land. Number 17, effective partnerships to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
Director of Basel Convention Regional Center for the Caribbean, Jewel Batchasing, gave an overview of the workshop.
Since such time as the accession, the BCRC Caribbean has provided support to the country in order to ensure that their obligations are met under the convention. So prior to this meeting, we've had 2 separate webinars with the Government of Grenada representatives. But today, since COVID also has been a bit lessened, we opted for the face-to-face. So the purpose of the workshop today is to explain to stakeholders about the Basel Convention, the obligations specific to the Basel Convention, and do an actual training exercise because it requires understanding of certain documents that have to happen. The Basel Convention deals with the transboundary movement of waste and chemicals, and it's imperative that these documents are understood in order to ensure that the obligations are met by the Government of Grenada.
Research analyst Janin Budram spoke on the prior informed consent procedure under the convention that enables parties to introduce legislation to prevent and punish those involved in illegally trafficking hazardous chemicals and other waste.
The objectives are to ensure that if hazardous waste or other waste which are listed for control under the convention must be shipped to any other country, prior informed consent must be received from the states which are involved in that movement. So this would include any states of transit as well as the state of import. And of course, once it does reach that state of import, it's also important to ensure that the facility which is receiving the waste is in compliance with national regulations and has the capacity to dispose of the waste or recover the waste, depending on the waste stream, in an environmentally sound manner.
That story just ended the national report for Wednesday, January 11th. Let's recap the top story. Government of Grenada lays down 3 options on the way forward for the Marketing and National Importing Board. On behalf of the entire news and production team, I am Rikisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us.